It was a cloudy Tuesday morning, and the sky above the little town was filled with gray clouds that threatened to rain any moment. The school bell rang loudly, and children ran through the hallways, laughing and shouting. It was a special day. At Riverbend Elementary School, parents and volunteers were invited to attend classes as part of open day. Some parents came in early, others later, and a few unknown faces stood quietly at the back of the classrooms. In the music room, Mr. Blake, the music teacher, was already playing a few light notes on the piano. He was a kind and energetic man in his early 30s, loved by students for his fun teaching style. Music class was his favorite time of the day, and he loved encouraging students to sing, dance, or try instruments without any fear. The classroom was filled with small chairs, a few instruments hanging on the walls, a large upright piano in the corner. As students began to gather, a woman walked quietly into the room. She wasn't anyone familiar. She wore a plain gray dress, had short graying hair tied in a low bun, and carried a small, worn-out handbag. Her face looked soft, kind, and a little tired. She didn't talk to anyone. She stood near the back wall, next to a shelf of tambourines and drums. Most people didn't even notice her enter. She looked like someone who didn't want attention, maybe a grandmother, or someone visiting the school for the first time. Mr. Blake noticed her, but didn't think much of it. He assumed she was just another guest visiting with one of the kids. He welcomed everyone and clapped his hands to begin class. "All right, young stars," he said cheerfully. "Today we're going to do something fun. Who wants to play an instrument?" Little hands shot up excitedly. Some kids rushed to the drums, others to the triangle or xylophone. A girl named Molly asked shyly, "Can someone play the piano today?" Mr. Blake smiled. "Of course." "Who wants to try?" The kids looked at each other, giggling, but no one came forward. Then, in a playful mood, Mr. Blake turned toward the woman standing silently at the back. With a chuckle, he asked, "How about you, ma'am? Would you like to try the piano?" He said it with a smile, not expecting her to say yes. He thought she would shake her head or laugh politely. But to everyone's surprise, she nodded softly. The children turned to look at her. Some looked confused. Who was she? Was she really going to play? The woman slowly walked toward the piano. Her shoes made soft tapping sounds on the floor. Didn't seem nervous. She placed her bag gently on a chair, pulled up the piano bench, and sat down gracefully. Her back was straight, her hands rested gently on her lap, and her eyes looked at the keys as if she knew each one like an old friend. Mr. Blake felt curious, but also a little unsure. Was this going to be awkward? Would she struggle? Maybe she knew how to play a little, maybe not. The kids were whispering behind him, making guesses. Then, without saying a word, the woman lifted her hands and placed her fingers gently on the piano keys. The moment she touched the keys, everything changed. The first note she played was soft but full of feeling. It rang through the room like a whisper of something beautiful. Then she played another note and another. Slowly, the melody began to build. It wasn't just random playing. It was music, real music, filled with emotion, power, and grace. The children stopped whispering. Some opened their mouths in awe. Mr. Blake stood frozen, eyes wide. The notes danced across the room. The woman's fingers moved quickly, but calmly, like waves on water. She wasn't looking at the keys. Her eyes were slightly closed, as if the music was coming from deep inside her heart, not from her hands. She played a tune that no one recognized, yet it felt familiar to everyone. Some students looked like they might cry. Others sat with their hands pressed against their hearts. There was something magical happening. The woman didn't look up. She kept playing soft and loud, fast and slow, like telling a story without using words. Every note was alive. It wasn't just beautiful. It was breathtaking. Mr. Blake felt goosebumps rise on his arms. He had taught music for years, attended concerts, and watched talented students. But this was something else. This was the kind of music that made you stop breathing for a second. It wasn't just skill, it was soul. When she finally stopped playing, the last note hung in the air like a feather falling. Then silence, deep silence. No one clapped at first because no one could move. It was like they were waking from a dream. Finally, a small student clapped softly, and others joined in slowly. But even the claps felt quiet, respectful, almost shy. The woman stood up, smiled softly, and said just one thing. I used to play. Before. Then she walked back to her spot near the wall, picked up her bag, and stood quietly again, as if nothing special had just happened. Mr. Blake was stunned. His mind raced. Who was she? How could someone play like that and be completely unknown? Was she a retired teacher? Forgotten performer? He wanted to ask 100 questions but didn't know where to begin. He finished the class, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. When the class ended and the children left, he looked around, but the woman had already gone. All just like that, quietly, peacefully, as if she had never been there. But the music remained in the room, echoing in everyone's hearts. That night, Mr. Blake couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about her. He remembered her hands, the way they moved on the keys, the sadness in her eyes, and the calm in her smile. He knew something unusual had happened. He didn't know her name, her past, or her story, but he knew one thing for sure. That woman wasn't just a guest. She was someone who had once lived and breathed music, someone who carried a story inside her. And Mr. Blake suddenly felt a strong need to know more. He needed to find out who she was, because people like her didn't just appear in schools by accident. They were like rare books hidden in plain sight, waiting to be opened. The next morning, he decided he would go to the school office and ask her name. Something told him that this quiet woman who had touched the piano so gently had once played in places far beyond this small town. Something told him her music had once touched the world, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to play again. The next day, the whole school felt different. Something had happened during music class the day before. Something the students couldn't explain but couldn't forget. It wasn't just that a woman had played the piano. It was the way she played it, the feeling in every note, the silence that followed, and the mystery in her soft words. I used to play. Before, those words stayed with everyone who had heard them. Even the teachers were talking about it in the staff room. Some thought she might be a retired music teacher. Others guessed she was once a performer, but no one knew for sure. Mr. Blake couldn't stop thinking about her. He had spent most of the night wondering about her identity. Her face, her hands, her quiet strength, all of it kept replaying in his mind. That music had stirred something deep inside him. It wasn't just beautiful, it was unforgettable. And he knew someone who could play like that had to have a story. A big one. When he reached school that morning, he went straight to the office and asked the receptionist, "Do you remember the woman who was here during my class yesterday? The one who played the piano?" The receptionist thought for a moment and said, "Oh, the lady in gray? Yes, she signed in. Let me check." She looked through the visitor logbook. After flipping a few pages, she found the name. Alina Grant, she read aloud. She said she's interested in volunteering once a week. That name Alina Grant didn't sound familiar to him. But now that he had something, he decided to look her up online. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe she was just a local with a love for music. But his gut told him otherwise. He waited until lunch, then opened his laptop and typed in the name. Alina Grant, pianist. Within seconds, results popped up. Articles, concert posters, interviews, videos, and just like that, his mouth fell open. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Alina Grant had been a world-famous pianist in the 1980s. She had performed at Carnegie Hall, toured across Europe, and played with the most respected orchestras in the world. She had won awards, appeared on TV, and was once called the soul of the piano by a popular magazine. People had compared her to the greats. She wasn't just good, she was a genius. But there was something else he noticed. Her career had ended suddenly in 1992. No explanation, no farewell concert, no interviews, just silence. A few old forums mentioned rumors of a family tragedy, and a short article from years ago hinted at personal loss. After that, she seemed to vanish from the world of music. No one knew where she had gone. Mr. Blake sat back in his chair, shocked. This quiet woman who had stood in his classroom, who wore simple clothes and said almost nothing, had once been one of the greatest pianists in the world, and no one at the school had known. I hadn't mentioned her past. She hadn't come for praise. She had just stood there watching the children and then played like an angel. He watched a video of her performing in the 80s. She was younger, full of energy, smiling as she played a powerful piece. But her style was the same, filled with emotion, control, and grace. Then he thought about the woman he saw yesterday. The music was still there, but her smile was quieter. There was something deep in her eyes, something only someone who had lived through pain would carry. The mystery was even more powerful now. Why had she come back to music? Why here, in this small school, after so many years? Mr. Blake decided to try reaching out. He found a phone number in her volunteer form and left a polite message. "Hi, Lena. This is Mr. Blake, the music teacher. I just wanted to say thank you again for yesterday. If you're ever free for coffee or would like to visit the class again, I'd be honored." He wasn't sure if she would reply. But later that evening, his phone buzzed. Text came in. "Thank you, Mr. Blake. I would be happy to join for coffee Thursday afternoon." He smiled. He didn't know what she would say or how much she would share, but he knew this was important. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a chance to understand a woman who had once been a light in the music world, and maybe still could be. On Thursday, they met at a quiet little cafe near the school. Alina arrived right on time. She wore the same kind of simple dress, carried the same old bag, and greeted him with a calm smile. They ordered tea, and for a while, they just talked. About the school, the children, and music. Mr. Blake didn't want to rush into questions. He let the conversation flow. Then gently he said, "I looked you up. I hope you don't mind. I didn't know who you were." Alina didn't look surprised. She nodded slowly and sipped her tea. "Most people don't," she said softly, "and I prefer it that way." Mr. Blake hesitated. "Why, you were incredible. You still are." Alina looked out the window, watching the trees sway in the wind. Then she said, "It was a long time ago. A different life." He didn't push. He waited. And after a few moments, she began to speak. "I started playing when I was 4, she said. "My father taught me. He was strict, but he loved music. I practiced every day, and by the time I was 12, I was performing at small concerts. I didn't have much of a childhood, really, just music." She paused, then continued. "By my 20s, I was traveling the world. Big stages, flashing, lights, people clapping. It all looked perfect. But I felt lonely. Music was my voice, but off stage, I had no one. Until I met Thomas." Her eyes softened. He was a violinist. He fell in love quickly, got married, and a year later, we had a daughter, Emily. She stopped, and Mr. Blake saw her fingers tighten around the teacup. They were everything, too. Me. More than music. More than anything. I started playing less, wanted to be home more. I thought I had finally found balance. Her voice grew quieter. Then one night, after a small concert, they went home ahead of me. The roads were wet. A truck driver didn't see the red light. The car was crushed. Mr. Blake felt his heart sink. Alina closed her eyes for a moment, as if pushing back tears. They were gone instantly. I wasn't in the car, so I was late because I stayed behind to sign autographs. Silence filled the table. No words felt right. I stopped playing. She said after a while, I couldn't even touch the keys. Music reminded me of them. Every note hurt. Mr. Blake nodded slowly, but yesterday, something changed. She gave a small smile. It's been 30 years. Time doesn't erase pain, but it changes how it lives inside you. I volunteered at the school to feel close to children. Didn't plan to play, but something about the class, the laughter, the energy, it reminded me of joy. Real joy. So when you asked, I thought, maybe it's time. Mr. Blake looked at her with admiration. It was beautiful, Alina. You gave those kids a gift they'll never forget. She looked at him with grateful eyes. They gave me something too. The courage to try again. That night, Mr. Blake sat alone in his classroom thinking about what he had heard. He looked at the piano, now no longer just an instrument in the corner. It had become a doorway, a symbol of healing, of loss, of return. He didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was clear. Lena Grant wasn't just a name from the past. She was still a musician, still a teacher. And maybe, just maybe, the world needed to hear her play again. Even if it started in a small classroom filled with laughter and curiosity, and somewhere deep inside her heart, part of Alina was waking up, a part that had been silent for too long. After that warm and emotional conversation at the little cafe, Mr. Blake felt like he had just read the first chapter of a powerful book. Alina Grant, the quiet woman who had stood unnoticed at the back of his music class, had once lived a life full of light, music, love, and then deep darkness. Her story touched him so deeply that he couldn't stop thinking about it. He started seeing the world around him a little differently. The piano in the corner of his classroom no longer felt like just an instrument. It had become a reminder of hidden stories and second chances. Mr. Blake wanted to help Alina, but he didn't want to push her. He didn't want to turn her life into a show or a headline. He just wanted her to feel welcome, respected, and free. Still, he hoped she might come back to the school again. He kept thinking about what she had said that the children reminded her of joy. He hoped that maybe, through teaching them, she could find a new kind of peace. A few days passed quietly. Then, on Monday morning, when Mr. Blake entered the music room, he saw a small, folded note on his desk. It was simple, written in neat handwriting. "I'd like to come again on Thursday. If the children would like to learn piano, I'd be happy to help Alina." Mr. Blake smiled so wide it made his cheeks hurt. He showed the note to the school principal, who was also touched. They agreed to let her help as a volunteer, assisting Mr. Blake once a week during music class. No special announcement. No attention. Just quietly helping children discover music just the way Alina liked it. Thursday came, and Alina arrived. At the school, wearing the same calm expression, she didn't dress fancy. She didn't carry any flashy music sheets. She just walked into the music room, nodded at Mr. Blake, and waited. The children remembered her. They didn't know her full story, but they remembered how the room had felt when she played the piano. There was excitement in the air, like something magical might happen again. Mr. Blake introduced her gently. "Class, this is Miss Alina. She's going to help us learn some basics on the piano. Be kind, be patient, and listen carefully." "Very good." The kids clapped politely and Alina smiled. She didn't talk much, but the way she sat beside each student, guiding their fingers softly across the keys, made the children trust her. She didn't just teach them to play notes. She helped them feel the music. She would say things like, "Close your eyes, imagine a happy memory. Now play like you're telling that memory with your hands." One little boy, Sam, who struggled with focus, surprised everyone when he sat with Alina and played a small tune without looking down. Alina gently told him, "You have music in your heart. Just listen to it." Mr. Blake watched all of this with amazement, falling in love with music in a deeper way than ever before. At the end of class, Alina stayed behind a little longer. She and Mr. Blake cleaned up the instruments and talked quietly. He asked, "How did it feel teaching again?" She looked thoughtful and said, "Like a door I had locked for years is slowly opening." As the weeks passed, Alina came every Thursday. The children started looking forward to those days. Some of them began practicing piano more seriously. A few even wrote little notes to her, saying things like, "I want to play like you. Thank you for helping me find my song." One girl, Anna, gave Alina a drawing of a piano with wings. "You make music fly," she wrote in crayon. Alina kept that drawing folded in her handbag. Meanwhile, school librarian Ms. Kent had been doing some quiet research of her own. She had read about Alina Grant years ago, but hadn't connected the dots until now. One day she found a dusty, old music magazine in the back corner of the library. The cover had a young, smiling Alina holding a bouquet after a concert. The title read, "The Soul of the Piano, Alina Grant's Rise to Fame." Miss Kent brought the magazine to Mr. Blake. He looked at it stunned. Even though the picture was old, there was no doubt. It was her. "Do you think we should show the kids?" Ms. Kent asked. Mr. Blake shook his head gently. Not yet. This isn't about fame for her. She's not ready for that. Let's just let her be Miss Alina, the quiet lady who makes music magical. But word slowly started to spread. One of the parents whose daughter loved Elena's class was a journalist at the local newspaper. She had noticed Elena's unique style and grace. Her daughter kept talking about how the piano lady made her feel like music was alive. The journalist asked Mr. Blake for permission to attend a class and maybe write a short piece. Mr. Blake was careful. He asked Alina first. She was quiet for a long moment, and she said, "If it helps children fall in love with music, then okay. But no big headlines. No stories about the past. Just about the present." So the journalist came in quietly, observed the class, and later wrote a beautiful article titled, "The Woman Who Teaches Music with Her Soul." It didn't mention her fame, her past, or the tragedy. It simply spoke about how she connected with children, how her music made the classroom feel like magic, and how even the shyest kids found their voice in her presence. The article went viral in the town. Parents began asking about piano lessons. Students from other classes wanted to join, but Alina asked the school to keep things simple. She didn't want a flood of attention. She wanted to keep helping quietly. One evening, after school, Mr. Blake found her sitting at the piano alone. The classroom was empty. The lights were dim. She was playing a soft, slow melody that sounded both happy and sad. He didn't want to interrupt, but she noticed him and smiled. "That song?" he asked gently. "Is it something you wrote?" She nodded. "I started writing it after my daughter was born. I never finished it until now." He sat beside her and listened. When she finished, she said something that stayed with him for a long time. "I thought music had abandoned me," she whispered. "But now I see. It was just waiting." Mr. Blake asked her if she would ever want to perform again, not on a big stage, but maybe at the school's end-of-year recital. She looked uncertain. "I don't know if I can." "You already have," he said, "every Thursday." Alina laughed softly, the kind of laugh that hadn't been heard in years. Then one morning, something unexpected happened. An old student of Mr. Blake's, who now studied at a music conservatory, visited the school. She brought a small group of friends who were all music majors. They sat in on the class and were amazed by what they saw. One of them recognized Alina immediately. He had studied her performances in college. "That's Alina Grant," he whispered. "She was a legend." Word started spreading among music lovers and teachers. Emails came in. Some music schools reached out, asking if she would consider mentoring young pianists. One local concert hall sent a polite invitation, offering her a small, quiet performance slot if she ever felt ready. Alina was overwhelmed. She didn't respond to most of the messages. She didn't want to return to that world, not yet. But she read every word. And she began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not sadness, but something else. A small spark. A quiet possibility. That evening, as she walked home from school, she passed by a music shop. In the window was a small upright piano, old but elegant. She stood there for a while, just looking at it. Her reflection in the glass looked older now, but behind her eyes, something had changed. She walked into the shop, placed her fingers on the keys, and played just a few soft notes. The shopkeeper watched her with wide eyes. "You play beautifully, ma'am," he said. She smiled. "Thank you. I used to before." Then she turned and left, her heart feeling a little lighter, her steps a little stronger. Mr. Blake didn't know what Elena's next step would be. He didn't know if she would ever perform on a stage again. But he knew this much: she had already returned. Not to fame, not to glory, but to herself. And sometimes that is the most beautiful comeback of all. The days passed gently, and Alina became a special part of the school. Every Thursday, she walked into the music room quietly, always wearing her same calm smile and simple clothes. The children had grown to love her. They didn't know her full story, but they knew how she made them feel: braver, stronger, more creative. She had a special way of making music feel like magic. Even students who were too shy to speak would sit beside her at the piano. Suddenly their hands would find notes they never thought they could play. Mr. Blake was always amazed when he watched her. She didn't teach with long explanations or strict rules. She taught with feeling. She would say, "Don't just play the notes. Listen to what the music is trying to tell you." The children understood her, even if they didn't fully realize the depth behind her words. And slowly, music class became the favorite time of the week for many of them. One Thursday afternoon, after class, Mr. Blake and Alina stayed behind to tidy up. The children had all gone home, and the school hallways were quiet. Mr. Blake leaned against the edge of the piano and looked at Alina, who was gently wiping the keys with a cloth. "I know you don't want attention," he said softly, "but people are starting to ask questions. More teachers know who you are. They're amazed." Alina didn't look up. She kept cleaning, her face calm. "It doesn't matter who I was. I'm not her anymore." "But I think you are," he replied carefully. "Just in a different way now." She stopped and finally met his eyes. For a few seconds, there was only silence between them. Then she sat down on the piano bench and sighed. "I used to think music was my whole world, my identity. When I lost my family, I felt like music betrayed me. Every note reminded me of them. I blamed the piano for my pain, even though deep down I knew it wasn't its fault." Mr. Blake sat beside her and listened quietly. She continued, her voice steady but emotional. "After the accident, I locked my piano. I never touched it again. I moved to a smaller town, changed my number, gave up my career. People thought I disappeared. I wanted them to think that." "But why?" Mr. Blake asked gently. "Because I didn't know who I was without them," she replied. "My husband and daughter were my music. Without them, everything felt empty." She looked down at her hands. "These hands used to play in front of thousands of people. Now they tremble when I play a single song. I'm not the same person. I don't want to be a star again. I just want peace." Mr. Blake understood. He had seen so many people chase fame, success, applause, and lose themselves. Alina wasn't one of them anymore. She had already lived that life. What she wanted now was something much deeper. Healing. "Alina," he said softly, "you don't have to return to the world. But maybe the world still needs to hear your music, even if it's just in this classroom." She gave a small smile, the kind that held both sadness and hope. Later that week, something happened that shook Alina more than she expected. One of the students, Anna, the same little girl who had once drawn a piano with wings for her, fell seriously ill. She had a condition no one knew about until she fainted during recess. The school called an ambulance, and she was rushed to the hospital. Alina visited her 2 days later. Anna lay in bed, tired and pale, but smiling when she saw Alina walk into the room. "Miss Alina," she whispered, "I miss your music." Alina sat beside her, took her hand and said, "Then I'll bring it to you." She spoke to the hospital staff and asked if she could bring a small keyboard into the room. They agreed. The next day, she returned with a portable piano. As Anna rested, Alina played soft, gentle tunes, ones filled with warmth and peace. Nurses stood quietly by the door, some with tears in their eyes. Alina didn't play to impress anyone. She played to comfort, to heal. After that visit, something shifted inside her. She realized that music could still be a gift, not a show. Not a stage performance, but something real. She remembered how her daughter used to fall asleep to her playing. And now, here she was, playing for another child, giving the same kind of peace. When she returned to the school, she seemed different, stronger, more open. Mr. Blake noticed it immediately. "You seem lighter," he said with a smile, "I think." She replied, "I finally forgave the piano." She started to spend more time at the school. She even agreed to do a short demonstration during a staff training session, showing how music could be used to help children with anxiety or emotional struggles. Her words were simple but powerful. Children don't always have the words to explain how they feel, but they can express it through music. You just have to teach them how to listen to themselves. The principal, deeply impressed, suggested, "Something unexpected? Would you consider performing at the end of your school concert?" Alina froze. "A performance? Yes, nothing grand. It's just one piece, maybe with one of your students. You don't have to say anything. Just play." Alina didn't answer right away. She needed time. That night, she sat alone in her living room. Her house was quiet, small, and filled with old memories. On a shelf stood a picture of her husband and daughter, smiling, frozen in time. Below, it sat her old music books untouched for decades. She opened one, her hands trembling slightly. The pages smelled like old paper and memories. Then she walked over to the upright piano in the corner. She hadn't played it in years. She lifted the cover, ran her fingers across the keys, began to play the unfinished piece she had once written for her daughter. The music was soft, unsure at first. But soon it became stronger, filled with love and sorrow. And when she reached the final note, the one she could never bring herself to play all those years ago, she held it gently, let it ring out, and cried. Not a cry of pain. A cry of release. The next morning she walked into the school and told Mr. Blake, "I'll play at the concert, but only if I can perform with Anna." Mr. Blake smiled wide. Of course she'll be thrilled. Anna was recovering well and had returned to school slowly. When Alina told her the idea, her eyes lit up. "Really? Me? With you?" Alina nodded. "You and me. Together." They started practicing a duet, simple but full of feeling. Alina played the deeper chords, and Anna played the lighter, brighter melody. It was like the two of them were having a conversation through music. At the end of each practice, Alina would say, "Let your heart lead your hands." As the concert day came closer, words started spreading again. More parents wanted to attend. The local journalist who had written about Alina before asked if she could come too. Alina agreed, but only if the article focused on the children, not her past. The night of the concert, the school hall was full. Lights were dim, chairs were packed, and students were buzzing with nervous excitement. Mr. Blake gave the opening speech, welcoming everyone and thanking them for their support then. He introduced the final performance, and now, a very special duet. Please welcome Anna and Miss Elena. As they walked onto the small stage, the room became still. Elena sat at the piano, Anna beside her. They looked at each other, smiled, and began to play. The music was soft, sweet, and full of emotion. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Every note told a story of healing, of love, of returning. Parents wiped away tears. Teachers held their breath. And when the final note rang through the hall, there was a long moment of silence, followed by loud, heartfelt applause. Alina stood, bowed slightly, and took Anna's hand. They walked off stage, together, no words needed. Backstage, Mr. Blake hugged her gently. "You did it." She nodded. "I did, and I feel free." That night, as she walked home under the stars, Alina felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had faced her past, found her way back to music, and most importantly, shared her gift again, not to be praised, but to help others feel something real. She realized that she didn't have to be the Alina Grant the world once knew. She just had to be herself, the quiet woman who played with heart, and that she finally understood was more than enough. After the concert night, something changed in the way people saw Alina, but even more importantly, something changed inside her. For years, she had hidden from her past, from her pain, and from the music that once made her world feel alive. But that one performance, playing beside little Anna, opened her heart again, not because of applause or attention, but because she had finally allowed herself to feel without fear. The music wasn't just sound anymore. I said it was healing. In the days that followed, parents began writing letters to the school. Some talked about how their children had never shown interest in music before, but now asked for piano lessons. Others spoke of how their kids seemed happier, calmer, more confident after attending Miss Elena's music classes. "My daughter used to be so shy she wouldn't even raise her hand in class. After hearing her talk about Miss Elena, I saw her sit down at the keyboard at home and play a song she had learned. I cried, 'I don't know what Miss Elena does, but it's magic.'" Elena read every letter quietly in her small kitchen, holding a cup of tea. She didn't smile for attention, but a quiet warmth filled her heart each time. She had never wanted to be famous again, but now she understood what she gave was still important. Just in a different way, Mr. Blake walked up to her one day after class and said, You're making a difference here, Elena, more than you know. The school board wants to meet you. Elena blinked. The school board. They're interested in starting a music therapy program for all the students, and they want you to lead it. It would be something new for the district. Elena felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. I'm not a therapist, she said. But you have the gift, he replied simply. You understand how music speaks when words can't. That's something no degree can teach. She agreed to meet the board. The meeting room was filled with teachers, staff, and some parents. At first, Elena spoke softly, her hands folded. But as she talked about how music had helped children express emotions, how it brought comfort to those who felt lost, and how it could help even the most silent child speak in their own ways, everyone listened. When she finished, there was silence. Then someone said, We'd be honored to have you lead this. Elena felt her eyes water a little. Not because she was proud, but because for the first time in years, she felt seen for who she truly was. It's not just a former concert pianist, not just a grieving mother, but someone who still had something to give. She accepted the offer, and the music therapy program began the next month. It started small, just one class a week with a few children who were struggling with different emotional or behavioral challenges. But soon, more and more students joined. Some had anxiety. Some had lost parents. Some just needed a place to feel safe. One boy, Daniel, hadn't spoken in class for 2 years. But after sitting next to Elena for 3 weeks, just watching her play, he finally pressed a key himself. Then another. And then one day, without anyone asking, he whispered, Can I try something? He sat at the piano and played a slow, simple melody. Everyone in the room froze. It was the first time anyone had heard his voice through the music. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She didn't say anything, just smiled and nodded. That boy now came every week, his fingers dancing on the keys. Elena started creating musical stories with the children. Instead of just teaching songs, she'd ask, How does happiness sound? Or what does a sad rainy day sound like? The students would close their eyes and play whatever came to their hearts. It didn't matter if the notes were perfect. What mattered was that they were honest. She even began to play small pieces of her own again. Not in concerts or competitions, but in the classroom, surrounded by children who listened not with judgment, but with love. Sometimes Elena would close her eyes and feel like her daughter was sitting there. Listening to one afternoon, a familiar face appeared in the music room doorway. It was the reporter Claire, who had once recognized her during that first school visit. She smiled, holding a camera. I've been following your story quietly, Elena. I think the world needs to hear what you're doing here, not as a comeback story, but as a lesson in healing. Elena shook her head gently. I don't want attention. The children are the real story, Claire agreed. Then let me tell it that way. She spent a week at the school, watching classes, interviewing parents, seeing how the children responded to the music sessions. Then she wrote a long piece titled, The Woman Who Played for Hearts, Not Applause. It went viral, people. All over the country read about Elena and her music therapy class. Musicians wrote letters thanking her for reminding them why they started playing in the first place. Teachers wrote from different schools, asking how they could start similar programs. Donations poured in not for Elena, but for the school, so they could buy better instruments and make the program permanent. Elena stayed calm through all of it. She still walked to school every day, still wore her simple clothes, and still made time to help each child one-on-one. But now she wasn't just healing quietly. She was inspiring others to do the same. A few weeks later, the school held another special event, a community night, where students could show what they had learned through music. Parents filled the hall again. Children took turns performing. Small pieces, some played solo, some with Elena. Every note told a story of growth, courage, and hope. Anna, now stronger and healthier, performed again with Elena. This time, they played a song they had written together. It was called Light. After rain. The melody was soft at first, like raindrops, then stronger, like the sun breaking through. The audience listened in silence, then clapped with love. After the event, a woman came up to Elena. She looked to be in her 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes. She said, "I lost my husband last year. I haven't touched the violin since. But tonight, when I saw those children play, I felt something. Maybe it's time I try again." Lena smiled and said, "Music waits for us, no matter how long we're away." That night, as Elena walked home, she passed the park where she had once sat in silence, unsure of who she was anymore. Now that same place felt different. It wasn't filled with memories that hurt. It was filled with reminders of how far she had come. She stood under a streetlight and looked up at the stars. Then softly, she hummed a tune she had written with her daughter long ago. This time, it didn't make her cry. It made her feel warm, because now she wasn't just surviving. She was living again. And though she would never forget her past, her family, her fame, her pain, she had found something greater than all of it: purpose. In the small music room of a simple school, Lena had become something more powerful than a concert pianist. She had become a quiet guide, a healer, a friend, and for the first time in many, many years, her heart was full.